Peace, welcome, greetings, everyone. Um, just to get us started, song for my mother, for our mother. Before the Torah was written with finger in stone, uh, the Torah was first written in breath, and that breath was carried by woman. In Hebraic culture, or in the Hebraic word, we have the word for womb, which is rechem, and rechem shares the same root as rachamim, which is mercy or compassion. Sometimes you see the word even Shekinah. You hear him say that in church, talking about feminine presence. And people think that the Shekinah descends. They always say, like, bring the Shekinah down. But the Shekinah doesn't descend, it dwells. It dwells in the heart. It dwells in the hearth, if you will. So the Shekinah, or the feminine energy and presence, is always the voice behind the prophet, or the voice behind the singer. It's the legacy of our mothers. And it holds a mystery, as many things do, but without fear. It births without recognition. Even when you look at the Kabbalistic tree of life, you have Malchut, and that's the lowest sphere on the tree of life. And it's feminine, it's earthly, it's nurturing, yet of course it's essential. You can't ascend unless you're first grounded. And of course our Egun, our ancestors, they knew that. And that's why the mother was never just a nurturer, but she was also a keeper of language. She was also a keeper of law. She was a keeper of land. Mothers know the herbal codes. Mothers kept ancestral names. And really importantly, mothers sang the moon songs. And those moon songs were sung to the daughters to help them regulate their waters. When you look at Malchut, for a second, or the throne of peace, of presence, and the Kabbalistic tree of life, Malchut is the lowest sephirah, or the final emanation, as we say. But the lowest doesn't mean the least, just to be clear on that. Malchut means kingdom, and it's also called the queen, Malchut. It is the manifested realm, where the point where all of the divine blueprint, it comes into physical reality. So it's the womb of creation, of the earth. It's the community of the body, and it is that Shekinah that you hear people talk about when we say, like, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. This is the Malchut. That's from Matthew 6:10. So that's a call for Malchut, or for the queen, to reflect divine harmony, right? Malchut is the only Sephiroth in the tree of life that receives its energy from all of the other Sephiroth. They all combine. So she doesn't initiate anything, she embodies everything. She recovers from, or rather, she receives light from above and births that light into the world. Right? Sound familiar? So if you look at Malchut also, and look at the connection to the, what you may call angels, but in the Hebrew, the word was malakim. And that word malakim, it comes from the root malik, or sometimes you know the name like Malik. But Malik is a messenger, or an agent, and important in the spiritual side of things. The Malakim are assigned to Malchut, right? They are transmitters between the divine will and the physical realm. You see that even the similarity in their names. And Malakim are not just winged feet, figures, like, all the wings and the light. That's not just, it's, what, we'll get into that. But the Malakim are actual frequencies. So just like Malchut is a conduit for all of the upper lights, the Malakim are conduits for divine intent into your lived experiences. So your angels are actually, or your angles, as you heard me say many times, they're frequencies and angles of the divine. So that's why your angles usually, or your angels, or your Malakim will usually ascend into your dreams. They'll come, when you're at a sort of a transition in life, at a threshold, because they work within Malchut. within the earthly plane. Malchut is the Shekinah, I would say, and Malchut is not just necessarily a Sephiroth, but the queen of Malchut is the dwelling presence of the bride. So the feminine face of Yah. Remember Elohim, let us make them in our image, male and female. She's the one uh, who goes into exile with the people and who returns when the people are restored. This is why we say Shekinah dwells with the lowly, because she is Malchut, the low, the throne, or the base of the tree of life. This is a place where heaven rests on earth, you know. So if we sort of look at the sound of creation, I talk about bringing things in creation, as I titled the segment, The Mother's Song. A mother's song, it does more than just soothe us, it encodes us, more importantly. So even modern science, like, it will tell you that the fetus, it recognizes the mother's voice and it recognizes its mother's distinct heartbeat, you know. But if we look at it from a deeper level, the voice is a vortex. So what she speaks, she weaves. And, that's why when you look at Hebrew and Afro-Shemitic tradition, the tongue is so guarded. It's so important because it's the mother who can bless, the birth of a nation, or she can curse a nation and cause them all to scatter, cause generations to scatter. In fact, when you read about Proverbs 31 and the virtuous woman or the capable woman, she isn't praised for her beauty per se. She's praised for her silence. She's praised for her strength, for her wisdom, for her enterprise. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and on her tongue is a Torah of kindness, as it says. So if you're looking at, again, the mother, or the Malchut, or the queen, or the woman, what is the legacy of a mother in a nation like ANU? Well, she's the first Torah we ever get to touch. Her body is our first classroom. Her walk is our first ritual. When a woman rises in her divine function, she doesn't just raise children; she resurrects dynasties. Her power isn't in limitation, it's an inheritance. Or I should say, her power isn't in imitation, it's an inheritance. She's a woman who carries a civilization on her hips. And she still, has to bend to pick up those who fall. Um, if every son is listening, you remember your crown is tied to your reverence for the womb. So no righteous man would ever curse the source from which he comes from. We'll get into that in a minute. But before there's any covenant of any sort, there's a cosmic matrix. There's a womb of potential. And even when you look in ancient Afro-Shemitic mysticism, this is the Sephirah Bina. Bina is the third Sephirah on the tree of life, and it means understanding, or translates to understanding. But also, it's considered the great mother, the dark, fertile void from which form is shaped. So she's the mother of time, the container, if you will, of all being. In Kabbalistic thought, Bina is also associated with Che. And Che, you see in the Tetragrammaton, Yod He Vav He. So Che is the breath. And it's the breath of the divine, that's the divine woman that's embedded in the name of Yah. So even in Bereshit, you have the Hebrew word for create, which is actually bara. It's very similar to create in Yoruba as well, but it's linked to the idea of birthing, or shaping reality through intentional presence. So that's part of the sacred function of the feminine. It's not to react, but it's to reveal. So I've shared this before. Like, the woman is the problem reporter, and the man is the problem solver. So she brings revelation. And she helps to map out the consciousness for how the sacred feminine governs cosmos, governs conflict, governs creation. The Hebrew or the Afro-Shemitic woman mirrored this in their divine, or mirrored the divine priesthood. If you look at like the story of Miriam, she wasn't just Moses' sister, like we speak about, but she was a prophetess. Um, she sung songs of liberation. She was a water bringer, and water in the womb are always linked to each other because water holds memory, ancestral memory. So you have like, even in Look, the daughters of Zion. I posted this recently in the Facebook group. Isaiah 3:18-23, where they were known by their anklets and their headbands and their veils. But that wasn't just fashion, but it was more so, or even like a signal of status. It was tribal alignment. It was spiritual function. In Nubia, Kush, um, and Sheba, you had queens who ruled as oracles. The Kandaki of Kush, they led armies. They oversaw like certain spiritual rites. And that legacy was passed down through the womb. So it's not just the bloodline. When you look at the esoteric aspects of femininity, it's not just a passive thing. It's just like you had the Ark of the Covenant, right? And that was hidden behind a veil. So the wisdom of the mother also was preserved behind layers of silence, um, ceremony, song, and there's a warning against uncontrolled feminine force that's divorced from the covenant. So sometimes you see that in the theories of like Eve and Lilith, where Lilith, they represent dual polarities, Eve being the nurturer and Lilith being the initiator. So there's order and chaos, or the vessel and the flame, if you will. In a lot of indigenous traditions, whether it's the Yoruba, the Akan, the Hebrew, the Berber, you have ancestry that's matrilineal. And in that sense, we know through Torah that your nation is tracked through your father, or your resh, your head, the clan head. However, there is still a deep connection with the feminine in terms of like cosmic security. Your mother's name, in that sense, was always your spiritual passport. In a matrilineal society, a mother's voice is like, it's like a tuning fork, like a metaphysical tuning fork. It encodes rhythm, it encodes language, it encodes identity. So what she speaks over her child becomes law in the spirit realm. This is why, like in Hebraic tradition, it warns the power of life and death are in the tongue. And when you look at Chokmah, which is another sephirah, it finds its completion inside of Bina, which is the feminine capacity to hold and translate energy. When you see that completion within there, um, you can look at even some of the physical representations. In the tabernacle of Musa, or Moses, or Moshe, and later the temple, the veil, or what we say the paroquet, is separate the holy of the holies from the outer courts, right? And behind that veil was the Ark of the Covenant, and that was the container or the entry point for the divine presence. So esoterically, the veil, it represented the membrane between dimensions, that threshold point between what's known and the unknowable, the outer world and the womb of Yah's presence. So if we parallel that with the female or the woman today, the woman today is the living veil. The woman is, or the womb itself is the holy of holies. And just as only the high priest could enter in once a year into the divine chamber, the same way is access to a righteous woman. It should be sacred. It should be reserved. I won't get into that too much, but she should be covered, protected, reserved, and have sexual morality. In the Kabbalah, you have Shekinah, which is often veiled like I said, in exiled and revealed moments of redemption. And that mirrors how the sacred feminine essence withdraws or it reveals according to divine timing. Um, Physically as well, if you look at like the reflection of the womb throughout like a lot of different cultures, Kemetic cultures, Nubian, even early Islamic, um, Eastern Christian architecture, you had these domes, and they were never just really like an aesthetic thing. You have them in Washington D.C. There were domes in stone, if you will, and a dome is a physical echoing of the sky. It's the belly, right? And that's the sacred chamber. It creates a space of gestation, a place where the heavenly spirit meets the earthly vessel, and when you read the scripture, the heaven is my throne and the earth is my footstool. So where is the house that you build unto me? That's Isaiah 38, no, Isaiah 66 and 1. So when you look at the Afro-Shemitic cosmology, the firmament, or the rakia, as we call it, was always understood to be a curved dome that separated the waters above from the waters below. That's Genesis 1, verse 6, around 6 through 7 or 6 to 8. So when the temple was built, it had an arched roof like a dome, and that covering represented the sacred separation and enclosure, just as the womb separates and nurtures the seed inside until it's ready to manifest, right? So that dome represents the separation, like what's inside of here is something that's sacred. In the tabernacle, you had the innermost chambers, and uh, or what they call the most holy place, and that place was concealed, and it was arched, by veils and by different coverings. And then later, like Hebraic and Lebanite or structures, you had these domes and these arches that were used to represent the vault of heaven, or Shemaim. And so the presence of, and it represented the presence of Yah when you saw that dome. So the womb and the dome are sacred thresholds. You don't pass through them casually, if you will. You prepare like the priest did. You clean yourself. You cleanse, like the priest did. And you enter in with intention. Okay? And there's so many representations. The womb itself is a cosmic portal. It's not just biologically. It's has a metaphysical space, if you will. It's a spiritual laboratory. And that's a spiritual laboratory where one's mission meets matter. If you look in even in Tameri or ancient Kemet, you have Nut, the sky, Natir, and she forms this celestial womb, and she births Ra every dawning, and the Afro-Shemitic idiom, the womb is called Rachim, like I was saying earlier, and that shares the same root with Rachamim, which means mercy or compassion. So it shows that the womb itself is a vessel and a virtue. The shape of the ark, the shape of the tent, all of these like replicate or supposed to replicate the womb, the hidden place where transformation occurs. So the womb is, like I said, it's a multi-dimensional gate, and what enters it, whether it's a seed, a word, or it's a vibration, it emerges transmuted. This is why sacred women were often oracles. Not just mothers; they were the gatekeepers between realms. When you look at today, you have representation of that in the hijab, and the hijab it provides protection, identity, and frequency. In Islam. Uh, and among many Afro-Shemitic communities, the hijab or the head covering, those not familiar. A lot of times it's misunderstood as only being there for modesty, but that's part of it. But it's a frequency regulator. Hair is a conductor of spiritual energy, and covering it can shield a woman from psychic and emotional noise. So it's like the crown of a Torah scroll. The scroll of the Torah is always covered with a veil, when someone's not reading it, of course. So the hijab, it protects sacred frequency, just like the Torah veil does the same thing. When you look at 1 Corinthians 11, Paul's writing from, I'd say, Hebraic mystical context, and notes that, women should cover their hair, or their hair as a sign of, or more so their head, not so much their hair, as a sign of power, not just subservience. The hijab signifies a woman who is aligned with the unseen realm, who honors the sacred responsibility of her presence. She has this cloak of sacredness. Esoterically, the things that are hidden are not weak, they're holy. So to veil something is to preserve its potency, and to not diminish its value. The veiled woman then becomes a living icon of divine restraint, icon of inner wisdom, of concealed fire. You know, um, I would say if you even look at the word mother, you could see so many powerful things just in even the word. In the Hebrew, we say im, or more affectionately, ima. But im, it's mother, aleph mim. And ima, more, aleph mim, aleph. Uh, the root being, amin, which means support, or it means the root, or the origin of something. So you look at the spiritual significance of im, which shares the same root with emunah, which means faith in Hebrew, or emet, which means truth. And it shows that the mother, as a source of stability and alignment, faith stabilizes us and truth aligns us. So when you look at the Shekinah aspect, again, of the female, it's expressed a lot of times in Kabbalistic in, imagery, but it's also, even in the Arabic form, you have where you have in Arabic, and im in Hebrew, and means mother, but it also means the source or the origin. So you have like al-Kitab. Al-Kitab means mother of the book. Al is the Kitab is book. And that's usually referring to like some sort of archetype that's in the Quran. And then you have al-Qur'an, al-Qur'an, which means mother of the cities, which is another term that's used for Mecca, al-Qur'an. So it identifies the womb as a spiritual and civilizational center. The mother is seen as the first teacher, um, who's essentially transmitting divine law and tradition. And the Yoruba, you've heard me say 1,001 times, Iya. Iya also, by name meaning, is an implication of a nurturer or a source of wisdom with Iya. Sometimes you hear like Iyami Oshoronga or Iyami Aje, the mothers, which is a primordial sort of term. Um, and they're sort of the guardians of, we could say, spiritual law, upholders of justice, and that tradition. Um, so mothers in Yoruba cosmology are revered forces. They're not just a family role, not to diminish it at all. Um, and the Bantu, which would be your Kiswahili, your Kikongo, your Zulu languages, you have Mama, which is a term that's used. You'll hear either Mama or you'll hear Enya. And sometimes you hear in Yina, or you'll hear in French, areas that were colonized by the French, you'll hear Mere. But again, that Inya, Mama, it's the caretaker. It's often used a lot of times, even for Elohim, like Mami Wata, you know, so which is a divine, it's a water spirit, Elohim. So in Bantu traditions, the mother is often the link to ancestral memory. That's why it's linked to water. And family lineage oftentimes is remembered through the maternal line. Um, in English, we have mother. It doesn't really have much of a spiritual meaning. It comes from the old English modor, and mother, just one who gives birth, or one who nurtures. Um, and and it's a value in there too. It doesn't really have the same sort of strong spiritual origin, but later it evolved through like the church and stuff, through like Mother Earth. You hear terms like that, or the Holy Mother Church, or Mother of Nations. And all of those things imply a sustenance. They imply protection, or you know. There's a lack of intrinsic sacredness in the root, and that sort of contrasts how the role is often elevated through poetic imagery or religious imagery in the West, but isn't there initially. So another cool way we honor the mother is we look at the drum. You know, and the drum, if we see it as a womb, which it often is depicted as, in its sacred feminine form, in many traditions, the drum is shaped like a womb. It's round, it's hollow, it contains space inside of it. And just like the womb carries the vibration of life, the drum holds and releases sacred sounds, which gives form to spirit. And it gives form to spirit through rhythm. The wooden body of the drum is often said to represent the body of the mother, while the membrane, or the skin of the drum, represents her voice. All right. So if you look at, for instance, the djembe, and the djembe, it gets its name from Abamana saying, and which is Ankeje Ankebe. And Ankeje Ankebe means, like everyone gather around together in peace. Like everyone come on and, let's be peace. And that reflects, if you think about it, the unifying energy of the mother, where like grandma sits everybody down, and everybody, oh, y'all chill out now. So there's a tonal thing there with the drum, of course. Most languages on the continent are very tonal, and it carries a semantic meaning through pitch. Just like a mother's lullaby can soothe or sort of warn a baby based on tone. You have in certain cultures, you have the dundun or the gangang, and that mimics again tonal inflections, or tonal fluctuations of human speech, and particularly the mother tongue. So the dundun, or the gangang, is used to carry like different genealogies, praise songs. In fact, the talking drum is usually used to praise female ancestors in particular, because the tone and the precision of it, and the emotion required to play it properly, are usually said to reflect the subtle nuances of a mother's voice. So if you see rhythm and drumming as a mothering function, you'll see in Afro-Shemitic cosmology where the mother is like the first regulator of rhythm, because she regulates the heartbeat, she regulates the breath, she regulates nursing, even in rocking. She's regulating rhythm when she's rocking the baby. So drum becomes like a ritualized version of maternal regulation that we all experience on some level. And that centers our body. It centers our spirit. Even in childbirth, there are specific rhythms, during those ceremonies that are played to honor the mother, to assist her through her labor, or celebrate the naming of a child. I know personally, I've experienced in Vudun and as well as in Ifa. You may bring forth Osun or Imanja or different archetypes, Oba, and they're invoked with certain rhythms or invoked with certain dances uh, to protection, to water, to fertility. So in some traditions, you have like even a large bass drum, and that bass drum is oftentimes called the mother drum. And it anchors the entire drum orchestra or the drum ensemble, and it sets a tone. It sets a tone for the others. Without it, the rhythm has no center. No downbeat, as we may say here in the West. But you need a center. So, like even in Ghana, the Ewede drum, they have this drum called the Astimevu, and it's a lead drum, it's a master drum, um, and then you have the Kidi or the Kangang, and that's often considered like the female drum because it has a more steady pulse, right? So the mother drum, it doesn't always lead by complexity, but it leads by consistency, and that's how women and mothers ground chaos of life. It's through consistency. You know, um, you don't have to be deep. You don't have to be complex. Just be consistent. There's certain drumming patterns that are used to call on maternal ancestors and rituals, and when people pour libation, and that sonic invocation sort of like functions, as a spiritual remembrance, a call, if you will, to the mothers who built villages, who wove the law into their children, who gave birth to warriors, you know. Um, so there's so many ways that we can honor it, and the depth and the design of our divine inheritance given through our mothers. We honor it through ritual, we honor it through remembrance, we honor it through rhythm. And this strong, I've prepared a Torah-based actual ritual for you, uh, honoring the mothers. I think I called it honoring them. Welcome to Shekinah, but honoring the mothers, the mother presence of Yah. I went through a few names, but it's a ritual that is a restoration. It's not borrowed from anything. It was inspired, and it draws directly on tabernacle pattern from the instructions given to our people when we first became a nation. And every item in the ritual itself holds a meaning. Like I have bread in there, and bread or lachim always represents a covenant, or it represents provision. Salt is also in there, which is a representation of purity and, most important, preservation. And you have candle oil, and usually your lamps, they symbolize like a continuous flame of wisdom, that continuous wisdom should never go out in our homes. Our olive oil is used for anointing, and that sort of declares and claims a space. It sets a space apart, and these are not just props, they're portals, if you will, and they call us back into alignment. They prepare us, our dwellings, to receive the presence, of the originator, the presence of the mother wisdom, the presence of the father knowledge. So I would say, if the insight has stirred your spirit and given you something, then I invite you to go further. You can actually receive the complete ritual guide with each step that's in it, and every scripture, because everything needs to be backed, and every sacred meaning. It's If you just got to join our mailing list for ANU Life Global Ministries. We just started it, so don't worry, you're not going to get bombarded. Because I don't like too much mail myself. So it's not just a moment of understanding, but it's a moment that can become a movement inside of your home. And you got to always remember the presence isn't far. The mother's waiting to dwell, wherever she's honored. It's not something that you pull down per se, but you reveal. Mother reveals, So yeah, the link will be in the description for the mailing list. You just sign up, and then you'll automatically be sent a PDF where you can go through the ritual. And feel free. You can comment on this video, or you can go to the Facebook group, ANU Life Global Village, and you can ask questions around it there or whatever, right? But yeah, you sign up for the mailing list, and you get a copy of it. So, I just really wanted to touch upon that vibration of mothering and give honor to it. The songs, it's similar to, like, everyone's talking about the movie Sinners, and you see the use of music, how music can compress time and space, and that film. And and if you haven't seen it, you might want to check it out. It's a good film. And I'm giving a plug too, because someone I know is in the film. A friend of mine's son actually is in the film. Miles. Miles is he plays they call him Church Boy in the film. He's the one who's singing and playing the guitar. Yeah, but it's a friend of mine's son. But so I'm plugged just off of the support. But you see the use of music. You see the use of sound in that. But we got that from my mama. They say shake what your mama gave you. Usually talking about one thing, but mama gave you rhythm because you were locked into that heartbeat. You were even locked into mama's sleeping patterns. you know and even during that gestation period in the womb, where she may not have been experiencing a physical menses, she still had a cycle, and you were experiencing her cycle along with her organ rhythm, the way her pineal would start to become more active with the absorption of the sun and things like that. And you start to learn rhythm and timing and ebb and flow and when the food is coming, and stuff like that, and the power of sound vibration, coming through your membrane. But she kept you veiled through the membrane. And it's no different than this planet that many of us are walking through. You remember et, as I've taught you many years ago, it means the smaller version of something. Et. So there's a plan, and then there's a planet. And so we are experiencing the smaller, representation and manifestation of a larger plan. So under the dome, or the rakia, or the firmament that we live under, we're like the experiment almost, or the plan, but we're gestating under this dome, or this representation of a womb, right? And we go from knowledge to born. We go from the first step to the end of the number, right? And then we born. We're in the year of the 9 right now, right? The year of the 9 in our supreme mathematics is born. The born, or to be, to come into existence, and it's a culmination of all of the degrees that were given to it before. Also, when you born, you also stand erect. Your head is now up. You're that 9, you gotta look at the shape of the 9. It's not like the letter B. The 9 is connected to the letter P, So you become the prophet, you become the one who now can stand and start to reset and go through your own numerical combinations. So, I wanted to share that, in this segment. I wanted to share the ritual that I created, and I will that you do it and you see and experience the changes in your home. I know how y'all love rituals. I know my people. I know how y'all love some rituals now. But yeah, it just gives you an opportunity to kind of dive into that maternal wisdom. Is so important. Every talk that we've been having has been about building the village, and you can't leave members out. When we talk about freedom and revolution, there's certain things that have to happen for it to happen. you know and everyone has to get free, the children, the elders, the fathers, the mothers, the sisters, the brothers. Everyone's got to get free, but we have to have an understanding and a reverence for the role that each person plays in the village. So I'm thankful for the rhythm and the forever presence and the power of revelation given to us through the feminine spirit and the feminine energy, and being able to walk through the world with that, because that is what makes us true deities. You see, you want the value of being a deity. What did it say in Bereshit? The man now knows he has become like one of us. Why did he become like one of us? Because now he knows. He knows now. It's been revealed. His eyes are open. It's been revealed to him. So that power of the maternal revelation is something that you never want to stomp over, skip over, anything. All right. So I wanted to share that with you and remind you that our retreat is coming up June 13th through 16th. We'll be in Georgia. Messed it up again. I can't remember the name of that town. Claudens, Claudesville, Claudensburgville, Claudensvilleburg, Claude something, Bomax Farms, or Bomax Ranch is where we're going to be. It's about an hour and change out of Atlanta. So if you're, in the area, whatever, and you want to come through the retreat, come on through. It's going to be a beautiful time. I'm definitely going to be sharing. And this year of the 9, I'm going to be equipping folks a lot more. That's something that the originator has put on my heart, to really equip folks a bit more with their own tools. Like similar to 1,000 years ago when I wrote Grasping the Root of Divine Power, as a tool for equipping people to do their own work, as opposed to being slave to the dogma of misguided false teachers and false priests or whatever. That's a space that we've circled to it once again. And this year of the 9, where we're in a space now where it's like, definitely trying to give you a lot more. We're not trying, I don't try to do anything, but I'm giving you a lot more practical tools, especially if some of you feel like, that was a Freudian slip. I said dumb of you. Some of you who may feel like, oh man, it's too much information. Although I don't see how that could ever be. How could you get too much? Especially if you have the ability to convert information into knowledge. Don't you want to be Elohim? But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But you're getting into this space now where we're definitely giving more. So the retreat, there'll be a lot more of that. So when you go check out the ritual, you sign up. If it's something that you say, man, I can get into this, then you might want to consider going to ANULifeGlobal.org and go to the retreat page, and you can sign up there. There's also links on the Facebook group as well to sign up as well for the retreat. Like I said, in mid-June, we'll be going. All right. So with that, I want to thank you all for spending this time with me, and willfully, like I said, your spirit was stirred, and you have some things to build on, and we can work together to restore what it is that has been stolen, and what it is that we have so foolishly and so recklessly abandoned, and be able to honor the mothers and the fathers, but honor the rhythm and the ancestral memory that the mothers have given to us, as a part of their job, as a part of their breath. Before we even came into any understanding about quote unquote God, anything, that first matrix that we we're allowed to gestate inside of and learn and see as the laboratory and touch, and things like that. And the activity, and like I said, the walk, the behavior of the mother became our first ritual because that was our first steps of efficacy. I think I can do it because I see her do it. I think I could walk because I see her walk. And I could eat like this because I could see her eat like this. I want to tie my shoes. I see her tie her shoes. So it's so important to model properly the responsibility that we're given, what we're mirroring as Elohim, what we are mirroring here on Malchut, where we have all these frequency of angles, or frequency of angels, or frequency of Malachim, or frequency of messengers. And those Malachim come as light frequencies. You see, those angles, they're angles of light, of knowledge that are coming to us. We have so many opportunities to tap in and to restore ourselves back to the source, as the word mama, or in Akan, mame, would, imply. We have so many opportunities to bind ourselves back into covenant with our actual creator, and not all of these made up, dogmatic, spook based religions and thoughts. I don't care if it came from Africa or not. Doesn't mean it ain't spookism. All right. So before you start thinking there, you got to check yourself. Do a spookism check. Sometimes you got to give yourself a spookism check, man. Like, am I running around in just blind belief based on this germ that's been implanted in me as a child of fear for what I do not know? Am I afraid to know? Your ancestors weren't afraid to know. And then they weren't afraid to take that knowledge and walk it out through wisdom to gain understanding. That's what my mama say. That's what mama say. All right. Until such time, thank you so much for listening and joining. And I'll see you, at the retreat, in the Facebook group, in the newsletters, on the I want to join our new application forms, or at the next insight right here. All right, it's Chief Yuya. Shalom.